From Conquer Books, and today we're talking about Wanders, Chuck Wendig's pandemic novel. So we are in a global pandemic. This is one of the newest pandemic books. It has echoes of Stephen King's The Stand. And so isn't it just fun to talk about pandemics? Yeah, I've been doing this series for a little while, and it is very interesting to me comparing what's happening in this fictional book that an author imagined a couple years ago. What would it be like to have a global pandemic? And now here we are living in it. And it's so interesting comparing what the author thought would happen versus how humans are actually responding now that we're in the midst of this. If you're looking for a spoiler-free review, I'll link down below to a spoiler-free review that you can get that Nicole and I did when Wanders first came out. I'll also link to the past months. So this book starts in June. I started reading it in June, and I've been reading it month by month ever since. So that means today we're talking about October. To catch you up, a brief recap, and prepare for lots and lots of spoilers. Basically, we have sleepwalkers walking across the United States. They seem infected with something, we think. We find out later that they actually are infected with nanotechnology, miniature robots controlled by Black Swan, the latest and hottest AI on the market, who is hoping to save mankind from White Mask. At the beginning of the book, we think that the sleepwalkers are actually the ones who are sick. They are the ones that Black Swan is trying to save. And we find out that the people who are actually sick, the real global pandemic kind of sneaks up on you in this book. It's White Mask, which originates from bats. And you don't know that you're sick right away. You are asymptomatic for months actually with White Mask. And so you go about your business, you are flying across the planet, you are going and seeing people in your daily life, and you have no idea that you are passing on this invisible spore. What happens when you do start to get symptomatic is you feel like you have a cold and it's really wearing you down, and then it just beats down on you, and it's actually a fungus that's growing up, pushing up into your brain. Yeah. And then you start to have symptoms of dementia, and people late stage with White Mask are wandering around outside. They may die from exposure. They may die because they're confused. You know, people who have guns in their household don't fare too well when you don't have your brain working top notch. And then eventually, if you survive all of that, then White Mask will kill you just by pushing up more and more this fungus into your brain. As you die, you decompose rapidly, and this fungus grows on your body, and the spores break open to infect more people. It is a terrifying disease, and thank God it's fictional, unlike what we're actually facing in our own real global pandemic. So this is the fate that Black Swan is trying to save humanity from. And Black Swan can only save about 1,200 people because that's all the nanotechnology Black Swan has to control their bodies. And so now we're in the part of the book where White Mask is prevalent across the country and across the world. Many of the characters are just now coming to terms with the fact that they are going to die, and they are going to see humanity die over the next few months. And there's a lot of fear about the violence and the political unrest that is going to follow, but a lot of the characters feel sad for the little things. Benji, one of the characters, comes to the realization that there's not going to be coffee anymore, and that nobody is going to be around to harvest the beans and, roast it and drink it. And the 1,200 people that Black Swan is trying to save will not experience the world and humanity like they have been up until now in this, universe. We get these lovely little snippets at the beginning of each chapter. Chuck Wendig himself is really on the internet heavily, and so a lot of the snippets at the beginning of chapters are like a fake tweet or a fake thread on Reddit, or maybe a song lyric or something from their universe that gives us context to what is going on here. And in these later chapters that take place in October, we see the internet dying. So people are noticing that nobody is around on the internet to tweet, either because they themselves are dying or dead, or because, as you know, people aren't working to keep up with our technology and our networks across the country. Things are fading away. And so we get this strong sense of all of these characters dealing with this grief. And I think that's why so clearly we see our point of view characters responding, trying to make amends in their own life. When you open up to October, the first thing that you read is one of these little snippets from a news story, and it says that the Supreme Court has decided to give the election to Republican Ed Creel. So if you remember from our previous videos, President Hunt was in the White House. This was an election year. Lots of thematic, crossovers, which makes it fun. And President Hunt was assassinated by this militia that is slowly but surely taking over the United States. And her successors are gone, either because they have white masked themselves and they are dead or dying, or because they're taking this time to be with their family in their last moments, or they have been assassinated by this white supremacist militia. And so the Supreme Court gives the election to Ed Creel just because they need somebody to be in power. Very interesting stuff. And as white mask is growing more prevalent and more individuals in the Wanderers universe get later stage, it's time for our point of view characters to be making some really hard decisions. One of my favorite characters is Pete Corley. He is this washed out has-been rock god who still has it, actually. He says whatever's on his mind. He is funny and cruel, and he does things to enjoy his life in the moment. Well, he decides now is the time to leave the flock of sleepwalkers. You'll remember originally he went there because he wanted to follow the cameras and have the media's attention on him. He's constantly seeking out love and admiration from the public. And now he knows that it's time to go back east and find his wife and children and make amends. He was not a father who was there for his kids. He was not a husband who was there for his wife. And this is his last chance. He thinks that his family is in his in-laws' compound, bunker, rich house, but he doesn't really know for sure because he can't call them. He can't just check in with them on the internet. And so he decides it's time to part ways with the sleepwalker flock, who he has genuinely grown to care for and at least understand that this is humanity's last hope to survive. This is a huge book, so we've already had the walkers cross from the East Coast to the West Coast, and now they're moving down California and they're moving towards Colorado, kind of swinging back again. And so Pete Corley's going to go on this another cross-country road trip to seek out his family, make amends before they die, or perhaps they will survive. He doesn't know at this point, but he's going to do it. And he's bringing his boyfriend. So I'm not sure how he thinks that all of this will play out, but one thing that's really important for him to do at this point in the book is to tell his children that he is a gay man, and he has never been open about it because of his fear for his career. And so he's bringing his boyfriend, and he just hopes things work out somehow. And so they get in the RV, they're going across the country. You get a lot of snippets of what they're seeing and what is happening. And people are just wandering because they're infected with white mask, or people are just, burning stuff down. Well, it turns out shortly into their trip, Pete Corley's boyfriend sneezes, and they think that he is sick with white mask as well. And so they decide to split ways. Landry decides to go down to Colorado, where they believe the flock is going to meet up, and try and do whatever he can to prepare. Suddenly, once you have white mask, you have this timeline on the end of your life, and Landry knows he can't stay with Pete because he could infect Pete, but he also wants to be useful. And he wants Pete to go and try and make amends with his family. And so we see this theme over and over with the characters in this section of the book in the October chapters, because they're up against the ends of their life and they need to do something. Pastor Matthew is a character we've been following really heavily as well, and he is no longer religious. After living, I think it was a month, maybe a month and a half in Ozark Stover's underground lair, and being forced to record podcasts about the sleepwalkers and kind of terrorize the nation with his, end of times doomsaying talk. He escapes. We saw that in September. And now he and his wife are reunited, and they're going to look for their son. Their son's name is Bo. And Bo has been close with Ozark Stover. Ozark Stover is a racist white supremacist that is one of the leaders of this militia movement. But Bo never had a father in Pastor Matthew. Pastor Matthew wasn't there for Bo. He wasn't there for his wife when she was dealing with her depression. And he feels like this is his only chance to try and be there for his family and try and make things better. So Bo, they know, is with Ozark's gang, but they don't know what he's doing. Ozark's gang is holed up on a fancy golf course / resort / suburb, and they are just out there keeping America great, they think. Matthew infiltrates and pretends to be one of them, and he finds Bo, but then it occurs to him that his son is too far gone. His son really believes what Ozark Stover is saying about white supremacy and saying about superiority of white people over others, and Matthew has nothing to give his son. What comes of Matthew infiltrating Ozark Stover's kind of like group is that he does meet and find Marcy, who's being held prisoner. So Marcy is a former police officer who she kind of got into a bad mess and got her head kicked in by these, I think they call them perps, and has really lost a lot of her faculties. But when she's around the sleepwalkers, something about the nanotechnology and being so close helps soothe her mind. She has metal plates in her head to, try and help keep her going. But in the last month, we saw that Marcy was captured by Ozark Stover's men. So Marcy's been prisoner for a month. She's been tortured. They've been trying to get more information about where the sleepwalkers are going, what their true purpose is, and she has just bravely kept mum on the subject. However, Ozark Stover's people still figure out that they're heading to Colorado, and Ozark tells Marcy that she didn't win. He's going to go and get them anyways. He is afraid of them because he doesn't understand them, and they are something entirely different. And it is his job apparently to just take control of everything, he thinks. But Matthew, though he can't save his son, he sees this as a way to bring his actions full circle. He was one of the people who was really talking up the fear-mongering early on in his podcast and in his preaching, and talking badly and violently about the sleepwalkers. And now Marcy tells him, you need to go, and you need to warn them. And so Matthew leaves without his son, which is hard for him, but he also can see that there's no resolution there. It's too little too late. So, getting closer to the sleepwalkers, Benji, who is the former CDC guy who, left in disgrace because he lied about a potential outbreak because he wanted so badly for there to be real change, and real change at a point where you actually can have change and not just, CDC coming in when it's too late to actually save lives. So he has been with the sleepwalkers for some time because the AI Black Swan was the one that originally brought him into it. And he doesn't know if he can trust Black Swan either, but he knows that white mask is a serious disease, and he sees the end of humanity coming. And if all he can do is try and protect the people that Black Swan has filled with nanotechnology and designated as the survivors of this catastrophe, then that's what he's going to do, because it is all that he could do. He does, however, get a hunch that there's this antifungal medicine that could have an impact. Maybe he hopes on people who Black Swan is not, set out to save directly. And he thinks that if he can get these pills, maybe by taking them, it will stave off white mask, the disease, long enough that he or whoever takes these pills can, survive and their body can kick into gear and battle it off. He doesn't know, but it's worth a shot. And so he leaves the flock really for the first time, and he goes to Las Vegas, where the pharmaceutical company has a location, and he seeks out these pills. Now, Las Vegas, if you've read The Stand before, you know that Las Vegas kind of, plays a role at end of the world things, because that's where one of the groups in The Stand was grouping up. Las Vegas here is just very briefly, but it's interesting to see how Chuck Wendig depicts some people at the end of the world. They're still gambling, they are still doing what they think is a good time, and there is no future for them, so they are living in their moment. Not good for Benji, because it's actually a very moment to be in down in Las Vegas. He does eventually get some of the pills, not as many as he was hoping for, and he doesn't yet know if these pills are going to make any difference. But in getting them, he unwittingly gives away the flock's end destination, which is how Ozark Stover finds out where they're going. Let's go even deeper into this. So you might remember Shanna, who we open with way at the beginning of this book, way in June. We're now in October. Shanna is in Black Swan's simulation. She was chosen by Black Swan after one of the other sleepwalkers died. And Black Swan has been choosing people who are super healthy, super smart, like basically who you would want to have as the survivor of humanity. Like Black Swan is trying to choose people from all walks of life and ethnic backgrounds and, high education levels. And like Black Swan is trying to build the next, population of civilization. Shanna was not at the top of Black Swan's list, but there are fewer and fewer healthy individuals because white mask is really spreading so rapidly. And so Black Swan decides, okay, I guess I'll take Shanna. Shanna is none too pleased. She is the most skeptical character about Black Swan, and she's even more skeptical now that she gets to the simulation. Her body is physically in real life walking across the US to their end destination in Colorado, and we don't really know yet what is going to happen when they get there. And it's almost as if she has two perspectives. If she thinks hard enough, she can see through her physical eyes to foggily see what is happening in the real physical world. But where her mind is in the simulation that Black Swan has created, which is actually in Colorado and where they are going to. And everybody has been hanging out there talking about being the survivors, and there's sadness for losing their friends and family, but there's also a lot of reverence for Black Swan for saving them. And Shanna is having none of that. They are trying to make Black Swan essentially into a god, and Shanna is incredibly suspicious, and her mother is there and she doesn't know if that's really her mother, and everything about what she's experiencing, she's wondering what thoughts are actually hers and what thoughts Black Swan is maybe feeding into her head. So it's a very difficult, complex situation to be in. We also get some better sense of how Black Swan views humanity. He makes a couple statements about how humans never say what they really mean to say, and how we're relatively easy to predict. And it's just interesting. This is the first time Black Swan is advanced enough to communicate at higher levels now. But also within the simulation, Black Swan can pretty much do what he wants, what it wants. I don't know, it's getting devious, and nobody really knows, and we hope to learn more about Black Swan, but we're not maybe quite there yet. So the tone of this section, the October chapters is very pessimistic. Things are not going well for the human race. And all the characters are just trying to make do with what they have left to them. Chuck Wendig really effortlessly outlines throughout the whole book like how they got themselves here, what steps had to be taken, what dominoes fell to cause this global pandemic. And I think now that it's getting into this very serious nature, this is where I see that the book diverges a little bit in theme in relation to what we're facing here in the real world. And of course it's a book, and of course he wrote this several years ago, but there's an amazing number of pieces here that just reflect back to us like a mirror, like American culture and our political system and conversation about religion and reality and how family and friends communicate, and all of these really heavy things. And so that's why I enjoy reading it during this time, because it is a way for me to think about the pandemic at a different level, maybe not so close to home, maybe a little bit removed and a little bit more this is entertainment. I was really eager to read this when it first came out last year. And what is happening with the real pandemic is, it's very worrisome. And a lot of people are trying their best. A lot of people, are still in the learning stage, I think, of what is going on with this. So I live in Northeast Wisconsin, and things are, I am so glad we are not living this pandemic. We have our own awful, horrible pandemic, but it doesn't compare. However, it's not going great here either. My area is definitely in a surge. There's about 3,000 sick people, new sick people every day in my state, the state of Wisconsin, which has been getting a lot of media attention because it really is the hotspot of the nation. Like the Midwest is not doing well right now. Most of the people that I know in my area have a number now of friends and family who have tested positive, maybe even have a friend or a family member who has died from COVID-19. And just like how Wendig outlines in his book how White Mask was able to kind of conquer civilization, it's really relatively easy to see how COVID-19 got a foothold here in Wisconsin. There's still a very big population of people who are anti-maskers, many who are not scared of COVID-19, thank you very much, and who value going back to business over lives saved, or who justify away the loss that we are experiencing. So our public health crisis was really exacerbated by all of these things and all of these people who have decided to make public health into a political choice. And there are many, many people here who are fighting against the wave. And I guess I identify or feel grateful a little bit for the characters in this book that are just trying to do something to support their society during their own pandemic. And here in my own reality, like, I see that happening and I see people doing that. But, even though you have a population of people who are sacrificing heavily to abide by mitigation measures and to really try and protect those around them, it almost doesn't matter when there's a small but determined population who are seeking to overturn all of that effort, or to pretend that nothing is happening and they're not the ones spreading the virus, or, it's really nothing to be afraid of. And so I guess I wanted to do this video series because I had been looking for some interesting projects to do during quarantine. I started doing this in June, and I had been planning on rereading Wanderers at some point because it was my favorite book of last year. I didn't expect to read it so soon. I usually, wait like 2 or 3 years before rereading something, but it just seemed like an interesting thing to read during this time. I also read The Stand, and now that I'm rereading it again, it's fun following along with the characters, but it's also a very interesting way for me to kind of analyze what is happening and give me kind of a baseline maybe for understanding like why we are reacting to the COVID-19 pandemic in our own reality the way that we are. You know, Chuck Wendig, as a author and a creator of this fictional world, was trying to guess at how people would respond when faced with a global pandemic, and comparing what he thought would happen with what is actually happening, I guess just provides another level of clarity. Like, I wish we were doing better, and I wish that there were more efforts in place, I guess. So my life is pretty different than, whoa, we're shaking there, than it was, you know, a year ago. I keep getting like Facebook memories or thinking about events and stuff I went to last year. My family is pretty hunkered down, and a lot of families are, but there's still this, you know, big wave going through Northeast Wisconsin right now. So it is hard, but I also can say with great certainty, I'm glad to not be living in Chuck Wendig's pandemic. I'm getting towards the end of the book now, and if you're reading along, you are too, and we are moving into November. So I will post the last video in this series in November, and we'll see where we're at then. If you are reading Wanders, even if you watch this video, you know, months and months later, you know, feel free to comment. Like, I always keep up with our YouTube comments, and I often don't have a ton of people in my real life who are reading the exact same thing I am, as like at the same time. And so it's I mean, it's great being able to pop online and talk with somebody about a book that you're reading. There's enough people online that somebody is going to be reading what you're reading, no matter what it is, right? All right, well, thank you. Bye.